Aurelion's soul has finally been reworked, and now he feels so much more like the cosmic dragon we all know and love. He's one of the most, if not the most, badass champions in the entire game, so here's a quick guide to help get you started. Aurelion's soul has fantastic AoE damage and crowd control and a relentless DPS output. He has the amazing ability to roam around the map and snowball it very quickly, but he also now scales incredibly well into the game thanks to his new Stardust passive. He's also pretty bulky due to his itemization, so if he does get ahead, not only does he seriously hurt, but he's also quite difficult to shut down too. He does take a bit of practice though, and he can struggle with mana issues. Additionally, a lot of his damage comes from his Q, which is a channeled ability, so naturally he will struggle against hard CC comps. Before we go into the builds and runes, let's quickly go over Aurelion's soul's new kit. His new passive is all about scaling and improving his abilities by collecting stacks of Stardust. He gains that Stardust by damaging enemies, and the amount varies by the target. Aurelion's soul's new Q is a channeled beam of Starfire, which he can steer in the target direction. If you recast it, it will end the ability early. This deals damage over time and also deals 50% damage to surrounding enemies hit. For each second that the beam continuously damages the same enemy champion, it bursts them, dealing bonus damage and granting 1 Stardust. The coolest thing is though, once you've maxed this ability, you can channel it indefinitely, as long as you have the mana. His new W dashes in the target direction, and whilst flying, his Q has no cooldown, no maximum channel duration, and its damage is increased. But when you are channeling your Q, you'll fly 50% slower. If you get a takedown within 3 seconds of damaging an enemy, this will reduce your W's current cooldown by 90%. And it is important to remember that CC will ground you though, so watch out for that. His new E conjures a black hole which lasts for 5 seconds and deals magic damage every 0.25 seconds to enemies inside. Enemies in the black hole are dragged towards its center, and those that are below 5% of their max health are also executed. When you get more Stardust, this brings the execute threshold higher, so it can be brutal in the later stages of the game. Here's the big thing though, after this ability ends, Aurelion's soul is granted 1 Stardust for each continuous second that enemy champions were inside it, plus varied amounts for other enemies that died inside it too. Finally, we have the new Aurelion's soul ultimate, which just feels and looks incredible. You cool down a star on the target location, and after a brief delay you deal huge damage and stun them for 1.25 seconds. This also grants 5 Stardust for each enemy champion hit. Here's where it gets a bit crazy though. Once you've got your ultimate and gathered a further 75 Stardust, your ultimate will evolve into an empowered version of this ability with a one-time use every 75 Stardust collected. This makes its AoE radius significantly bigger, deals way more damage and knocks up enemies instead of stunning them. It also unleashes a huge shockwave, dealing damage to enemies' hits and slowing and revealing them. Yes, this really is as awesome as it sounds. So before we get into the build and runes, don't forget that these change pretty often as items and champions get buffed and nerfed. So if you do want to stay up to date with this, check out our constantly updated desktop app, which shows you all the best builds based on win rates, what's most popular, and what the pros are using too. Okay, so for your runes, the most successful setup right now is based around First Strike, then take Boots, then Minion Dematerializer, and then finish off with Cosmic Insight. After that, go for Sorcery and take Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm for even better scaling throughout games. In terms of your skill order, you'll actually want to max your E first, then your Q second, and finish off with your W. For your build, we'd advise getting an early tier of the goddess and then going for either a Liondra's Anguish or a Rod of Ages as your main mythic item. After that, you can look at getting a Ryla's Crystal Scepter, your Sorcerer's Shoes, and then turning that tier into an Archangel Staff. With this selection of items, you'll be super durable, you'll have endless mana, and you'll deal some pretty tasty damage too. After that, it's time to finish off your build depending on what you need. If you want to round off your build with tons of damage, go for Rauden's Death Cap and avoid Staff. If you want some more survivability, you've got Zhonya's Hourglass or a Banshee's Veil. If you are absolutely popping off, you can also go for a Magi's Soul Stealer to snowball super hard. And of course, if you do need anti-heal, don't forget about Morello's. Moving on to matchups, and Aurelion's Soul works best in lanes where he can bully those low range matchups while scaling up that passive for free. Try to harass these lanes whilst you're farming, don't let them trade with you for free, and do not be afraid to punish them for trying. Aurelion's Soul struggles against matchups with crazy mobility and burst potential that can relentlessly get on top of him and dodge all of his damage at the same time. You'll want to try and keep the wave outside your tower and focus on farming, scaling, and roaming here instead. Remember to respect their all-in potential, and especially so once they get that level 6 power spike. In terms of synergy, there are certain champions in the game with high engage and AoE crowd control that just make playing Aurelion's Soul so much more enjoyable. Champions like Amumu, Jarvan, Dyna, or Rel who can lock down enemy teams or even better group them together ready for that empowered ultimate are just so much fun to play with. Moving on to the lane phase, and during this period you'll be wanting to farm up and poke your enemy at the same time. Your Q and your E will be your main abilities to use to do this, and try and collect as much Stardust as you can in the process. Your W is your main form of mobility, so you can use this to commit to all-ins to escape bad fights and ganks, but also to set up ganks for your jungler as well. Just be careful to time this ability around enemies CC, because this will bring you back down to earth and ruin your fun. Remember though that if you do manage to get a kill after using your W, you will have the cooldown almost reset, so you can get back out to safety again or chase down even more opponents. From level 6 onwards, once you have your ultimate, your kill potential, your gank setup, and your team fighting is significantly stronger. So try and use this ability wisely in those early dragon fights to get a really good lead with your allies. Once you've got a bit of Stardust under your cosmic belt, the range of your W will increase and allow you to pull off some pretty nasty roams. When it comes to team fights, it's all about obliterating as many enemies as you can with those Starfire beams. Try to navigate fights with your W and kite backwards, dealing as much damage as you can with your Q. Obviously though, one of the main attractions and strengths of Aurelion Sol is his AoE devastation. Look to line up a huge ultimate alongside your E to tear through teams and lock them down ready for your team at the same time. If you fight in confined spaces, you always have the potential to ace teams on your own if you land your abilities perfectly. If you are struggling to land those abilities though, try and wait for your team to engage and then charge in to follow up with them. This is the most reliable way to maximize your damage and impact throughout fights, if your allied champions are capable of setting it up for you. Finally, do not be afraid to flank behind teams with your W. If you manage to pull this off, you can completely demolish those backlines and sway the fight into your team's favour in just a matter of seconds. Just be mindful of enemies' crowd control on your way in, so clear those wards and get the jump on them before they can react. Thanks for checking out our guide on the new Aurelion Sol rework. Hopefully this video gives you everything you need to know to get started. Don't forget to check out Mobalytics to stay up to date with all the best Aurelion Sol builds and runes and to make sure you're always playing him the best way. Thanks for watching guys, and we'll see you next time. Take care.